Alrighty, this is going to be episode 14 of the Pixel Remaster Final Fantasy 1 of our Final Fantasy Legacy series. We are now in the Chaos Shrine, I believe. Yes, we are revisiting the Chaos Shrine, the last dungeon. We are now in the hidden part of the Chaos Dungeon after you defeat all of the 4 fiends and you revive the 4 crystals, as you can see, red, orange, green, blue, fire, earth, wind, water. So, let's get through this dungeon, see what happens. Alright, so just to let y'all know, down and to the right, there's a pathway on this floor where you can go get a sword called the Morimasa. I'm not playing the ninja class, but if you was playing the ninja class, that's like the strongest weapon for the ninja job, basically. So we're gonna skip that. We're gonna refight Tachimaru again. But yeah, the Morimasa is down and to the right on that floor, on basement floor 4. But other than that, I don't need to go get it because not for the job that I have though. Even though I think it says it's the second best weapon. No, it's the first best weapon for the ninja, and the Sasuke blade is the second best weapon. But because you get 2 Sasuke blades, only the ninja can use the Sasuke blade and the Morimasa. So if you're using a ninja, go get that weapon. But it's so weird because back in the day, these games, like I said, used to be hard. I was telling Meta Panda they used to be so hard because this is one of the first games I played on the Nintendo. So I'm sitting here like, man, I had struggled back in the day. So I could understand how it was designed to be back then. But now it's like, they've made these games so easy to get that it's like, you think about it and it's like, wow, I don't need that weapon if I'm almost to the end of the game anyway. Alrighty now, we're at the final boss. Let's do this. Do you remember me? I was once the most renowned king of Cornelia. Why to me, every time I hear Cornelia, it sounds like a French pastry. 2,000 years from now, Cornelia. It still always sounds like a French. 2,000 years from now, you killed me, Iron Garland. Oh, you did defeat me then. But the four great forces saved me by sending me back to time. Once here, I sent the four fiends into the future, where they shall once again use the four great forces to send me into the past. In 2,000 years, I will remember none of this. Chaos! Darkness. But I will be reborn again here. So even as you die again and again, I shall return. Born again into this endless cycle that I have created. Yep, that's chaos for you. As much as you want to make a joke about that, and I see where you're trying to be funny, in all retrospect, he kind of is very similar to Ganon. Like his whole storyline, he's kind of very similar to Ganon. It's like the concept of like, you can never get rid of Ganon because he's always like a repeated ending boss. That's why I said when I said, yeah, they're kind of very similar. Like, yeah, he might not be the final boss of each Final Fantasy game, but the concept of chaos is kind of like the final boss, where he's like the big bad of like Final Fantasy in general. Because when they did Dissidia, they explained it and see, you have Dissidia, and then you have Dissidia Duodecim, and then you have Dissidia NT. They're all one story, but at the end of Duodecim, when you beat Chaos finally, he goes on to say, I'm choosing to rest in peace and let two new people take their place. Which still represents, Chaos and all that, but they just took Chaos and just broke him down to more minor parts, basically. Where in, like, NT, there are two new people who represent Chaos and the chick, basically. I've never got my butt kicked that bad by chaos ever. That was the first time I say I literally got wiped. Like one wrong move, he will take advantage of you. I've always beaten this dude super easy. Hey, yo, when did they give him Karaja? He just healed his whole life. When did it? Yo, I'm missing something. They must have updated this or something. He never had that ability. That's broken. He just healed his whole life? That's not fair. That was close. Yeah, I knew it. That's why I was kind of killed. And you get haste? Yo. He just buffed the hell out of this dude. I need to start getting stuff off of hell. That's not good. Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. He's trying to take out. Okay, so what he's doing is that he's taking out the weak person. So I have to focus all of my research on the weakest person, and it'll keep having me do that. So the black mage is going to have to stay down because it's going to take me off of fighting him just to be able to like get him up. Next turn, he's gonna try to take out the tank. Waste all my resources just like that. I knew it. I knew it, man. Damn it! Now I gotta play fucking catch up to like waste all my resources on it. Now I'm back in like recovery mode, basically. Death. Not gonna live this. Oh, good. Fucking slipped up. Okay. Whew, she lived. Too close to death. That shit. Damn, this game. Damn, I'm barely doing anything. What the fuck is... Where's my damage at? What happened? Why am I only doing 8 damage? What is going on? Something's not right. I don't know if my game is bugged or something, but something's not right. I'm only doing like 8 damage in here. It's like it's taking out the red mage, so it stops me from buffing him up. And every time I get it up, get the red mage up, I just seem to automatically he wants to target the red mage to get rid of it. See? Oh, Jesus Christ. And I was doing really good too. I did not target. Oh, wow. Wow. You're dead. Over me. I don't understand where this 8 damage is coming from. Yeah, I'm dead. There's no way how I'm gonna get back from this. Where the fuck is this 8 damage coming from? What? Hold on. Let me see if they did an update to the game or something. Oh, just minor bug fixes. He has never been this damn hard. Do I not have something on? Like the strongest weapon I can find. Am I not a high enough level? Yeah, something ain't right. So all you gotta do is just like blitzkrieg him, basically. You just buff up the knight, and you just do like ridiculous levels of damage to him. Unless that's changed. He's already going after you. I hate status effects in this game because status effects don't hit for shit. I just feel like if somebody stays down, if somebody goes down, they have to stay down. Yeah. If somebody goes down, they have to stay down. Because that's like taking a turn just to be able to revive them, and he's just gonna nuke you. Like as soon as one of your party members fall, he's gonna be like, alright, let me just, he's gonna do like AoE damage and just nuke your whole team. You've seen me beat this dude multiple times, Vanderpinter. Why now? I feel like they just secretly took the game and just tweaked the AI way more harder. hit. This is just so weird. Like, out of nowhere, I'm just like doing 80 damage. Like, what the fuck? After doing like almost 400 something. I don't understand that. Like, why my damage scales just drop out of nowhere. And I got all my stats on everybody, so it's like I just randomly just lose hits. Yeah, see? Now I'm getting crits of like almost 400 damage. That's how you should be knocking him out. Because that's how he's always been, just blitzkrieging. That has always been the way I've seen speedrunners just straight up blitzkrieg him. And it's just, he's like one of the easiest fights in the game. Where is my damage going? Like, what? Whoa! What the fuck? Yeah, hold on, let me concentrate, hold on. Still in this. Back. Okay, that's not done. Got magic. We got protect. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. We're still in this. We're still in this. Bottom one needs blink. Wow. Wow. You gonna slow him down too? What? We got rid of haste, so I gotta put haste on him. You already have blink? Yes, you already have blink. Doesn't have protect. I'm just going to do a small heal. I think. I feel like we'll pull out some bullshit. One shot it. What? All right. Nice. Then on my turn, go. See, and it's gonna take. He gonna take advantage of that. He's gonna take advantage of it. Try this again. Roger. Phoenix down. He slipped up. Nice. Then do a whole party one. Another dry ether. Not gonna allow Commander Panda to get up at all. He's trying to mitigate damage that I'm doing to him by having me focus on trying to get a party member up to waste turns. Now I gotta waste a turn healing him, my tank now. Now all my priority is going to go back to getting my tank up. Okay. And it's going to go back and forth like that. We need like a party heal. Yeah, that ain't gonna work. I'm gonna have to restart. When did this happen, man? He was so easy to beat. Really need a strategy guy because I know how to beat him. Blink or 5 plus blink on everybody. When you get to 7, cast 5 blink on everybody. Chaos Witness. So just literally cast blink on everybody and he can't hit you. Cast blink and gnaw all. First thing to do is to spam Invisible with as many spell charges as possible in the white room. For example, if you have a red wizard or a white mage into Invisible, you can cast it 3 times on Okay. I think I know how to do this. Make it to where though he can't hit me. Oh, she's paralyzed. Oh, shit. That is a first. I just want to cheat the system. He doesn't target my tank. I'm realizing that. Hold up, wait a minute. He can't hit my tank. Unless it's like an AoE move. I thought you can stack moves in this game though. Holy shit, I hit 1,000 damage. Just blitzkrieging, what the fuck? He can't even target you. Holy crap, the level of damage! He don't even fucking target you. That is broken! Oh, that was close. That is literally insane levels of damage that I'm doing. I didn't know, I forgot that you could stack abilities. Black Mage's basically not doing nothing. Did I do it? Oh shit! Dude, that is I forgot that you could stack abilities. Yeah, that's why I looked at it. And he was like, yeah, you can literally just like +7 on something. And I was like, wait, you could do that? Because I remember in the old game, once you have that stat, it just sticks. You don't have to keep reapplying it. The old NES version, you just have it. I totally forgot that in the new ones, they just let you stack abilities. The time loop was severed at last. The endless struggle that raged over 2,000 years had ended and peace prevailed once more. The light of the four crystals restored the forces of wind, water, earth, and fire. It was a mere trick of fate that had given rise to the chain of Garland's wrath. But magnified by the four forces meant to guide our world, the trick of fate also gave birth to the fiends. Monsters had ran rapid as the world sunk into darkness. But all that is now past. With the four forces following as they were meant, the warriors prepared to cross time and returned to the world they knew, a world where Princess Sarah, Queen Jenna, and even Garland himself awaited. When was this fateful day that sent time spiraling into a loop? None can say. It seemed the cycle into which time had fallen would last forever, but the bravery of four young travelers changed that. They took the force that filled the world with darkness and used them to bathe the world in light. None will ever recall the struggle the four endured, for the breaking of the chain means that it will never It never existed. But within the tales of fantasy that people tell, the memories of these deeds live on. Tales of dwarves, elvins, and dragons in shining civilizations that reach the heavens even as they fell. And now the return is upon us. With the memories of their struggle buried deep in their hearts, they will quickly watch over our world. Remember always that the forces of the world may be used as they were intended. That the power of light must never be used for dark, and that the true crystals reside in your heart. For you are the warrior who crossed time. You are the bringer of light. Yeah, they updated that because the original one was like, thanks for playing. You've now defeated. It was like, congratulations, you are now defeated Garland. It was something really simple, but that. GG's. So instead of going into Final Fantasy 2, if you want to be correct, we should play the other one, Stranger of Paradise. To the fans across the globe, past and present. Oh, that went past too fast. That was a thank you notice. Yeah, and that is now Final Fantasy 1 Pixel Remaster. The Pixel Remaster versions are so much better. So much better. That was a way more difficult challenge from what I remember. Because like I said, I knew that all you had to do was blitzkrieg him. Because a lot of people speedrun Final Fantasy 1. And I've watched a lot of them, and they're like, yeah, the final boss is a lot more easier than the Four Fiends of Light. Because the Four Fiends of Light do like strategies that if you don't know the strategy, like if you're a first time player, that can throw you off guard. Because like I said, I know that for a fact because the original NES, I didn't realize how difficult, I didn't realize how easy it was until like my third playthrough. The first time he caught me off guard because I didn't know what I was doing. The second time only because I was playing in like a Japanese version. But the third time after looking it up, I was like, yo, he's super fucking easy. All you had to do was just like blitzkrieg him basically. Just super power up and just do damage to him. And that's like how I was doing it, where I was like, okay, you get this, you get this, you get this, and just keep attacking. As long as you can heal through it, because literally the reason why you want to make a white mage, this is why when they say if you can beat the game with like 4 of one character, like if you beat the game with 4 knights, you're a beast if you could beat it with 4 knights. Because without a white mage, you're just screwed. Now it's harder to beat it with 4 white mages or 4 black mages because they're just squishy. But like, I've seen people do it. It's difficult, but that's why they have these difficult challenges out here, because the boss was just easy. But with that being said, thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for viewing it. That is Final Fantasy 1 Pixel Remaster, a part of the Final Fantasy Legacy. I don't know if I'm going to do a poll on Discord, which I should, but if we're going in chronological order, I do want to play Stranger of Paradise, and the reason why I want to play Stranger of Paradise next is because it follows the story of Garland. And if you really want to get technical, the mobile game that they had, Exodus, Final Fantasy Exodus or something like that, that follows the actual True Warrior of Light, Wall. The one that you see in like Final Fantasy 14 when he has that fight, the dude with the sword and the shield, and he has like the gold and blue, that's Wall. That's the depiction of the true Warrior of Light. So if you really want to get technical, I think the next game in the series before we do 2, which would make sense to go through all the Pixel Remaster games by chronological order of release, 2 would be the next game. But if you really want to know the story of Final Fantasy for new players by now, or if you never picked up a Final Fantasy game, Garland, the Warrior of Light, Garland, such and such, that would be right to go about it that way and play that way if you want to know more about the character Garland, or why he became Chaos, why he's searching for Chaos and all that, yada yada. So I personally want to do 2. I personally want to do Stranger of Paradise. I have to see if I have it. But with that being said, thank you all for now. I am still going to be streaming, but for YouTube, that's going to be for YouTube. Next Friday, I will put a poll. I'll put a poll up on Discord, and by next Friday, we'll know what the next game in the series is gonna be. If not, I'll make a decision by myself. So, thank y'all, and we will see y'all in the next Final Fantasy Fridays.